Part 1. Ancient secrets lie deep beneath modern cities, mysterious organizations operate in the shadows, and strange symbols hold power far beyond common understanding. I once thought these things only existed in books and legends until they found me. My name is Adrian Grey, a 39-year-old investigative journalist specializing in exposing religious scams and secret cults. 10 years in the profession have given me enough experience to know that most secret societies are just hoaxes set up to profit from the gullible. But last night I had a dream of skeletal buildings, of blood flowing down walls at strange angles, and of a symbol I had never seen yet was eerily familiar. The word, Stigma. On the first Monday of May, a pale gray letter appeared in my mailbox. No stamp, no sender's address. Just my name, Adrian Grey, written in dark red ink on the surface of the envelope with swirling strokes, as if the writer's hand was trembling with fear or excitement. I sipped my coffee and tore open the envelope in the small living room of my rented apartment in the old quarter. The pungent smell of red wax assaulted my nostrils, making me frown. Strange, the red wax was still warm, as if it had been sealed just minutes ago. The circular wax seal bore an etched symbol, the word Stigma, standing alone within a circle, surrounded by two intersecting tools, a ruler and a compass, exactly like in my dream. A new kind of junk mail, I muttered, tossing the envelope onto the table, trying to ignore the chill running down my spine. But why couldn't I take my eyes off it? And somehow, the smell of red wax clung to my nostrils like a distant, undeniable memory. Perhaps it was because I had spent the last 2 months researching secret societies, especially the Freemasons, for an investigative report. If only I could show this to Evelyn. She would laugh heartily and call it an occupational hazard, a sign that the cults knew I was investigating them and were trying to intimidate me. But Evelyn Carter, my lover and colleague at the Chronicle, had disappeared 3 weeks ago, right as she was pursuing a case of mysterious disappearances. The police had started to give up, but I hadn't. I pulled out the parchment paper inside. It felt thick and heavy in my hand, as if it had more layers than its thin appearance suggested. Dear Mr. Grey, the Council of Shadows cordially invites you to a special tribunal at midnight on May 6th at the old Viceroy's Palace, Macdin Kai Street. This invitation cannot be refused. Stigma has returned. The ancient bloodline awaits. We know who you are. No signature, just the stigma mark deeply pressed into the paper at the bottom of the page. A stupid prank. I folded the paper and shoved it into my pants pocket, intending to throw it in the trash when I passed by. The old Viceroy's Palace, a colonial building abandoned for decades, stood isolated from the residential area, surrounded by ghostly tales. No one dared approach it at night. My phone rang, an unknown number. Adrian Grey, I answered, my other hand still holding the coffee cup. You received our letter. A deep, gravelly male voice spoke, not a question but an assertion. I jumped up, spilling my coffee, a chill running down my spine. Who is this? Freemason, the man replied. The Freemasons, you know us, Adrian, you always have. The Freemasons, one of the world's oldest secret societies, originating from medieval stonemasons guilds, were believed to hold ancient secrets and wield extensive influence over governments. This was precisely the subject of the investigative article I was working on. I scoffed. All right, I don't know who's playing this game, but if you're trying to scare an investigative journalist, you've picked the wrong person. Evelyn Carter. The name froze me. The chessboard had just changed. This was no longer a prank or a trick to intimidate a journalist. If you want to know what happened to her, come to the tribunal, the voice continued. And Adrian, don't call the police. We are everywhere, even within the investigation team for Miss Carter's disappearance. I was about to ask more, but the call disconnected. The phone screen flashed, displaying a symbol G inside a compass and square before going completely blank. What the hell? I pressed the power button, shook the phone, but it was completely dead. When I looked up, I saw the wall clock had also stopped. The hour and minute hands overlapped, forming a perfect 90-degree angle. The second hand vibrated hopelessly, stuck at the number 6. My hands trembled. A perfect 90-degree angle, an important symbol in Freemasonry representing integrity and uprightness. This couldn't be a coincidence. Outside the window, a black crow perched on a dry branch watching me. Its eyes glowed red like 2 drops of blood. I wasn't superstitious, but in folklore, crows were often seen as omens of death. A faint buzzing started in my ears, like the distant sound of a handsaw. The buzzing gradually shifted into indistinguishable whispers. "You don't look too good, Adrian." I startled and turned around. Lisa, my assistant, stood at my office door with a stack of files. She raised an eyebrow at me. 20 years old, a final-year journalism student interning, she had been my right hand in investigations for the past 6 months. "Just a headache," I lied, trying to regain my composure. "Could you get me 2 aspirins?" Lisa nodded and turned to leave. Before she exited, she paused. "Oh, Adrian, someone left this for you. It's a bit strange." She placed a small box wrapped in black paper on my desk. A red stigma mark was affixed to the lid, the same symbol from the letter. "Who left this?" I asked, my mouth feeling dry. Lisa shrugged. "I don't know. It was at the newsroom door this morning when I arrived. I thought it was the postman. But strangely, none of the security staff saw anyone leave it." As Lisa left, I slowly opened the box, half expecting it to be just another prank from someone who knew I was investigating the Freemasons. But inside was an ancient brass key and a slip of paper that read, "Room 333, triangular corridor, key to the Blood Temple. Are you ready to remember?" My hands trembled. The number 33, the highest degree in the Scottish rite of Freemasonry. I had never heard of a blood temple or a triangular corridor in the old Viceroy's palace, but deep in my mind, a strange sense of familiarity arose, as if I had known these terms before. Evelyn, the woman I loved, who shared my bed, laughed with me, who had disappeared suddenly while investigating a series of mysterious disappearances. Had she found something about the Freemasons or this Council of Shadows? I opened my desk drawer and took out my Glock 19, a habit from my days as a war correspondent in Syria. I checked the ammunition and clipped it to my belt, hidden beneath my vest. If the Freemasons, or whoever was behind this, were truly involved in Evelyn's disappearance, I wouldn't go in empty-handed. The parchment paper in my pocket suddenly grew hot, as if it were burning. When I pulled it out, the words had changed. "We see you, Adrian. Stigma knows you will come. The bloodline awaits. The spine will rise." Red ink dripped from the paper onto my hand. Not ink, but blood. Fresh, warm, sticky blood. This could no longer be a hallucination or a prank. On my computer screen, a video began to play itself. No sender, no email, no notification. Evelyn was in a dark room, chained to a stone table. Her eyes were wide with terror, her blonde hair matted with blood on either side. Behind her was a wall covered with strange symbols and a giant G. A white-gloved hand appeared, holding a sharp compass, its point aimed at Evelyn's neck. The screen went black. I knew where I had to go, and I knew I didn't have much time. If the Freemasons, or whoever was impersonating them, were truly behind Evelyn's disappearance, I would find them and they would pay. The old Viceroy's palace loomed before me like an architectural nightmare. A colonial building abandoned for decades, hidden behind a row of ancient trees. Its mottled gray stone facade, streaked with dark green moss, had tall windows that seemed covered by an opaque film. Built in the late 19th century, the building had once been the center of power for the colonial government before being abandoned after a series of mysterious events. On this night, under a nearly full moon, I could almost swear the building was breathing. "Damn it," I muttered, checking the gun in my jacket pocket. "What the hell are you doing here, Adrian?" I wasn't a believer in the supernatural. As an investigative journalist, I had exposed enough spiritual hoaxes to know they were elaborate staged acts. But Evelyn, she was real, and if she was being held here, I had to go in. My research into Freemasonry over the past few months had taught me that while popularly known as an ancient secret society focused on morality and charity, there were more secretive branches that split from the main organization. Some of these branches were rumored to be involved in secret rituals and even disappearances. But were they real? I had never found concrete evidence. Until now. The main door was shut tight, but a side entrance on the left wing was ajar, as if waiting for me. A musty smell assaulted my nostrils as I stepped in, along with another scent foul and sickly sweet like rust mixed with sugar. Inside was pitch black. I turned on my phone's flashlight. Its weak beam swept across the dust-covered marble floor. Fresh footprints appeared, leading deeper inside. And was that blood? I bent down, touching a dark red streak on the stone floor. Still wet. Instinctively, I drew my gun. The cold feel of the metal in my hand offered some comfort as I followed the blood trails leading into a long corridor. "Evelyn," I called softly, my voice echoing through the empty rooms. No answer, just the wind whistling through cracks in the doors and the faint buzzing, like the sound I'd heard in my office. The buzz of a saw. The corridor gradually narrowed, and I realized it was curving at a strange angle. Not the usual 90 degrees, but a much sharper angle. As I continued, I realized I was entering a triangular corridor. 3 sections of the hallway met, forming 3 perfect 120-degree angles. Along the walls were bizarre symbols: rulers, compasses, eyes within triangles, and the letter G appearing repeatedly. All were deeply carved into the stone, and all were dripping blood. "What the hell?" I whispered, backing away as I realized the symbols were actually oozing a dark red liquid that streamed down the walls and pooled on the floor. My flashlight began to flicker, its light weakening. Darkness slowly swallowed me, and in a moment of desperation, I thought I heard whispers. Hundreds of voices at once, speaking an ancient language. I tried to steady myself. "It's just the wind," I told myself, "just the wind and your imagination." Suddenly I caught another scent, the smell of boiling bones, as if someone was making bone broth nearby. The sweet aroma mingled with the metallic tang of blood, creating a strange, almost appetizing smell. I had smelled this before when reporting on a case involving a brutal cult in the north. They used human bones in their sacrificial rituals, but here, the scent was much stronger and fresher. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I had to keep going. For Evelyn. Turning the final corner of the triangular corridor, I saw it. A heavy oak door with a triangular symbol and the letter G deeply carved into it. A brass plaque read, "Room 333. Just then, I heard Evelyn's voice, a choked scream, echoing from behind the door. "Evelyn," I yelled, rushing to the door and trying to push it open. Locked. The key. I pulled the brass key from my pocket, my hands trembling as I tried to insert it into the lock. It fit precisely, as if made specifically for this door. I turned the key, heard a dry click, and the door slowly opened with an eerie creak. The smell of boiling bones and fresh blood rushed out like an invisible wall, forcing me back. Inside room 333, an unimaginable scene unfolded. About 20 men in black robes stood in a circle, wearing emotionless white masks. In the center of the circle was a blood-stained stone table, and on it Evelyn. She lay there, eyes wide with extreme terror, mouth gagged, her body tightly bound to the stone table with black leather straps. A tall man stood beside her, holding a colossal silver compass. "Welcome, Adrian Grey," the man said, his deep, gravelly voice familiar, the same voice from the phone call. "We have been waiting for you." "Let her go," I yelled, raising my gun and aiming at him. The man merely smirked. "Please put down your weapon, Grand Mason. You are not here to save her." It was then I realized everyone in the room was looking at me with reverence. And the corridor behind me had vanished, replaced by another triangular corridor oozing a thick, reddish-pink fluid. "You are here," the man continued, "to reclaim your position, to remember, to become Stigma once again." A sharp, searing pain shot through my right shoulder, and I felt something sharp cutting into my flesh from within. The gun fell from my hand, clattering to the floor with a resounding echo. The pain spread from my right shoulder like a raging fire, consuming my flesh. I doubled over, a groan escaping my throat involuntarily. It wasn't just ordinary pain, but a sensation of tiny saw blades making precise cuts beneath my skin. "It is rising," a voice whispered from behind, laced with unconcealed excitement. "The mark is appearing." I staggered, trying to reach for the gun, but the pain brought me to my knees. Sweat dripped from my forehead, salty as it rolled into the corners of my mouth. In my delirium, I heard a steady, deep chant in a strange language. Not Latin, not Hebrew, but something far older. Enochian, the language of angels according to internal Freemason legends. "Stigma," they chanted. "Stigma, stigma." Through eyes blurred with pain, I saw Evelyn still struggling on the stone table. Her eyes were wide, no longer with fear, but with another emotion: indignation, or perhaps surprise. The tall man in the black robe approached me. His long, bony fingers gripped my chin, forcing me to look directly into the dark, cold eyes behind the white mask. "Look," he commanded, his voice deep as a bell tolling in a damp crypt. "Look at your shoulder, Grand Mason." I didn't want to, but my body seemed to have a will of its own. I slowly turned my head and looked down at my right shoulder. Through my torn shirt, blood soaked the fabric, but it wasn't flowing down as usual. Instead, it formed clear, sharp lines, a symbol of the intersecting compass and square with a G in the center. Not drawn on my skin, but raised from within, as if my shoulder blade had carved it into the flesh from the inside out. According to what I had read about Freemason rituals, they believed in the ability to engrave symbols onto bones, an ancient form of osteomancy, bone magic. But I had never thought it was real. "No way," I whispered, my head spinning. "What the hell is happening?" Dry laughter echoed around me. The tall man released my chin and stepped back, looking satisfied. "The mark has returned," he declared. "The bone mark has recognized its master." He turned to the men in the circle. "Brethren, Stigma has returned to us." Cheers erupted, but I could only focus on Evelyn. She had stopped struggling, her eyes now looking at me with disappointment. "I am not Stigma," I gasped, trying to stand up, but the pain still gripped my body. "I am Adrian Grey, an investigative journalist. I don't know who you people are, but if you don't release Evelyn immediately—" "Adrian Grey?" the man interrupted me, his voice filled with amusement. "Born May 13th, 1985. Mother died in childbirth. Father died in a car accident when you were 12. Grew up in St. Michael's Orphanage, studied journalism at Columbia University, specialized in investigating cults and secret organizations." He leaned down and whispered into my ear, "and did not exist before May 1st, 2010. My heart stopped. "What the hell are you talking about?" "No birth certificate, no parents' death certificates, no pre-university transcripts," he continued. "Adrian Grey is a name, a shell, a mask." I shook my head, trying to dismiss these nonsensical words. "You're insane. I have a life, memories." "Implanted memories?" A female voice spoke, startling me. "Evelyn." I turned to look at her, wondering how she could speak with her mouth still gagged, but her mouth was no longer gagged. She was sitting up, the binding straps falling to the floor like dead black snakes. "I tried to make you remember," Evelyn said, her voice no longer the gentle one I knew. Instead, it was sharp and ancient, as if coming from someone who had lived for centuries. "Your nightmares of skeletal architecture, your drawings in your sleep, even your constant research into Freemasonry without knowing why." She stood up from the stone table, blood dripping to the floor with each step. I realized with horror that it wasn't her blood, but blood from the stone table soaked into her clothes. "Evelyn," I whispered, "what's happening?" "My name is not Evelyn." She walked closer to me, a distorted smile on her familiar face. "I am Pyloros, tasked with finding Stigma again, with awakening your memory." Another searing pain pierced my shoulder, this time spreading down my arm and chest. I felt tiny drills twisting into my ribs, carving invisible symbols. "Do you remember the keystone?" the woman I once called Evelyn asked, her voice full of eagerness. "Do you remember how you created it?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I groaned, the pain growing more intense. "The operating table," she pointed to the stone table. "That is where you created the cornerstone, where you took 33 spines to build the blood temple." A fleeting image flashed in my mind. This stone table, but older, and I was standing beside it, holding a colossal silver compass. Before me was a man bound, and I was placing the compass point onto his spine. "No," I screamed, trying to banish the horrifying image. "That's not me." But the mark on my shoulder was now burning. Not with fire, but with a cold, blue light. Blood from the wound formed perfectly geometric streams, spreading into a larger G symbol on the floor. The tall man knelt before me, his voice full of reverence. "Grandmaster Stigma, it has been 124 years since your departure. Blood Temple 33 still awaits your return. We need you to complete the work." Memories, or at least something resembling memories, began to flood my mind. Images of a magnificent architecture made of bone and blood. A living temple where the pillars were made of human spines, where the walls bled in absolutely precise geometric patterns. No, I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. I'm not him, I can't be him. But the mark on my shoulder now glowed so brightly that it shone through my torn shirt, casting a long shadow of the compass and square symbol onto the opposite wall. Let the keystone guide you, the tall man said, handing me the silver compass. See what you have created. My hand, against my will, reached out and took the compass. It felt perfect in my grip, as if it was made only for me to use. Evelyn smiled, gesturing towards a hidden door I hadn't noticed before. Come, Grand Mason, the keystone awaits you. And in utter horror, I realized my feet were moving, following her towards the mysterious door. The secret door opened with a dry creak, like bones rubbing together. Inside was a room larger than I expected, with a towering ceiling forming a perfect dome. No windows, only torches mounted on the walls casting flickering, amber light that made the shadows come alive and dance. In the center of the room was a massive operating table made of black marble, not ordinary marble. Its surface reflected the light with a strange depth, as if you were looking into a pool of black water. The veins in the stone formed precise geometric patterns, too perfect to be natural. And on the operating table, my God, I whispered, still clutching the silver compass, is that the real Evelyn? On the operating table was a body, or rather, what remained of a body. The skin and flesh had been methodically stripped away, revealing an almost intact skeleton. But not ordinary bones, they had been bent, carved, transformed into a miniature model of some architecture. The spine curved to form the main pillar. The ribs fanned out like arches, the pelvis expanded like the foundation of a tower. This transformation could not have been done after death. It required the bones to be alive, still flexible and adaptable. This was not the work of an ordinary murderer or a mad artist. This was the work of an architect with profound knowledge of anatomy and biology. The face was still grotesquely intact. The face of Evelyn Carter, her eyes wide, her mouth distorted in a silent scream. Her blonde hair fell like a shroud, matted with blood but still lustrous in the torchlight. This is Keystone prototype number 32, the woman I thought was Evelyn said, her voice full of pride. A masterpiece. Evelyn's real organs, liver, lungs, heart, were meticulously arranged around the bone model. Each part was cut into precise geometric shapes, like components of a complex building. You are monsters, I whispered, feeling sick to my stomach. Why her? Because she is the last one, the tall man said, now standing beside me. The final stone for Blood Temple 33, you chose her long ago. Another voice spoke, a small, thin man with round glasses that reflected the torchlight. Her bloodline bears the mark of the keystone. The Carter bloodline was chosen 124 years ago. I shook my head in horror. No, not me, I don't know about this. But something within me knew, a deep, dormant part, slowly awakening, whispering in my ear that this was only the first part of a much grander masterpiece. The woman stepped forward, her face now changed, no longer resembling Evelyn. Instead, it was like a leather mask, stretched over an older, more angular face. You once called me Agatha, she said, removing the Evelyn mask, revealing her true face, an older woman, perhaps in her 60s, with scars slashed across her cheeks. Pyloros of the Blood Temple, the one who preserved knowledge in your absence. I don't know you, I replied, trying to step back, but my body felt as if it no longer belonged to me. Look at the keystone, Agatha commanded, and remember. Unconsciously, my eyes turned to Evelyn's disfigured remains, and then, like a flood, images rushed into my mind. 1901. I stood over this very marble table, holding the silver compass. Before me was a young man, his eyes wide with fear. Lucas Reed, I whispered, our keystone. The compass plunged deep into his spine. The screech of metal on bone echoed, blood splattered, but not naturally. It flew up, forming complex patterns in the air, freezing into mysterious symbols. Stigma, the masked men whispered in awe, the god architect. No, I screamed, trying to push away the images. That wasn't me. But at the same time, Evelyn's body began to move. Not like a resurrected person, but like a machine being activated. Her joints ground against each other, emitting a gruesome creaking sound. Her spine, which had been bent into a pillar, began to rotate like a gear. Blood from her severed vessels no longer flowed out but flew up, coalescing into perfect spheres suspended in the air. "The keystone mechanism has been activated," the tall man announced, his voice filled with excitement. "Grandmaster, it is time for you to create the blood temple once again." Suddenly, an explosion erupted from behind, blowing the door inward. A man rushed in, gun in hand, an incredibly familiar face. "Lucas," I whispered, recognizing the face of the man who had been nationally sought. Lucas Reed, the journalist who mysteriously disappeared 3 months ago. "Run, Adrian," he yelled, firing shots towards the group of Freemasons. "That's not Evelyn, it's a trap." Agatha burst into cold laughter, an icy sound like breaking glass. "Too late, Reed. Stigma has awakened. The blood temple will rise again." Lucas fired at Agatha, but the bullets froze in midair, suspended like Evelyn's blood droplets. "Stay away from him," Lucas roared, lunging towards me. And in that instant, Evelyn's bone model suddenly ignited. Not ordinary fire, but a strange black flame that consumed her entire body in a flash, leaving behind an intricately delicate miniature architectural framework of silver. "Blood temple model, phase 1 complete," Agatha declared. "To the choir room, brethren, the keystone is ready." The Freemasons began to move towards the back of the room, where a spiral staircase descended that I hadn't noticed before. Lucas grabbed my shoulder, his eyes wide with desperation. "Adrian, listen to me, they've tricked you. They want you to believe your stigma, but it's just a psychological game. I've been investigating them for 2 years. They're not true Freemasons. They're the Red Branch cult, using Masonic symbols to cover their sacrificial rituals." I looked down at the compass in my hand, then at the silver model of the blood temple. Another memory spoke, not from 1901, but from last week. I was in my office, reading files on Lucas Reed, the missing journalist investigating a mysterious cult. "Lucas," I whispered, "where's Evelyn, the real Evelyn?" His eyes darkened. He paused. "Adrian, we have to go now. They've completed the initiation ritual. We're next." The tall man turned to look at us through his mask. "Stigma, come with us, or if you choose to remain with the blasphemer." He pointed at Lucas. "Then remember, he is keystone number 33. His fate has been sealed." Lucas yanked my arm, pulling me towards the main door. "We have to go now." Agatha blocked the exit, a distorted smile still on her lips. "Adrian, where will you go? With the blasphemer or fulfill your destiny? How many souls have been sacrificed for this moment to take place?" I looked down at the compass in my hand, then at Lucas. A clear choice, but why was my hand still gripping the compass as if it were a part of my body? "I am not Stigma," I said, convincing myself more than them. "Then how do you explain the mark on your shoulder?" Agatha asked. "How do you explain the dreams, the drawings, your obsession with Freemasonry? How do you explain knowing exactly how to use that compass?" I shook my head, trying to dismiss her words. "I'm not a murderer. I didn't kill Evelyn." "You didn't," Lucas said urgently. "That maniac over there, Alexander Graves." He pointed at the tall man. "He killed Evelyn, just as he killed 32 others before her." The tall man, Graves, burst out laughing. 33 souls for 33 pillars of the blood temple. And now, Lucas Reed, your fate has arrived. "Run," Lucas yelled, pushing me towards the door. Part 2. We plunged down the staircase. Lucas's footsteps echoed in the suddenly narrow space. The corridor below was dark and damp. The scent of blood and rotting flesh assaulted my nostrils, forcing me to cover my mouth to keep from vomiting. "The investigative reporter found his way here thanks to a cop friend, huh?" I panted, trying to keep up with Lucas. "Or thanks to the Freemasons' invitation." Lucas glanced at me, half smiling, half amazed. "You're still in the mood for jokes in a situation like this." "Laughing to keep from going insane," I replied, the gun in my hand trembling. "At least I know Evelyn wasn't." "Not quite her," Lucas cut in, his voice softer. "What do you mean?" I stopped, grabbing his arm. "Evelyn Carter disappeared almost a month ago," Lucas said quickly. "But the girl in there, her DNA matched, but a lot of other things didn't. I've been tracking this case for a long time, and this isn't the first time the Red Branch has created a duplicate. I shook my head, not understanding what the Red Branch was. Let's focus on getting out of here first. Lucas pulled me, moving again, turning into a dark corner. I've placed explosives at the eastern exit, if we can get there. Chanting suddenly erupted from behind us. A deep, resonant melody in Latin, as if from dozens of throats singing in unison. Not the Latin I'd heard in Catholic ceremonies, but an older, more twisted Latin. Stigma dominus architectus sanguis edificium surgit. How do they know which way we're going? I whispered. Remember the mark on your shoulder? Lucas replied bitterly. They can track you, they've marked you. We turned into a large room and immediately froze. The sight before us made my blood run cold. It was a circular room with a high ceiling, designed like a miniature Roman amphitheater. But instead of seats, around the room were 7 stone tables, each with a person lying on it, or rather, what remained of a person. 7 victims had been dismembered from neck to groin, their chests and abdomens splayed open like bloody books. Their ribs were bent outwards, forming the shape of wide-open wooden doors. Their organs were carefully arranged outside their bodies. Each organ was attached to thin cables that stretched up to the ceiling. The ribcage choir, Lucas whispered, his face pale, blood bells. And indeed, as I looked closer, I realized that the cables attached to the victims' organs were connected to a complex system of bells on the ceiling. Each time a cable was pulled, the organ was tugged, creating different sounds from the bells. They're turning people into instruments, I choked out. And that's just the beginning. A familiar voice echoed from behind us. Alexander Graves. We spun around. Graves had removed his mask, revealing a gaunt, sickly yellow face with deep-set dark eyes. Following him were about 20 men, all in black robes. But instead of ordinary Masonic aprons, they wore aprons crudely sewn from human skin. We need a perfect score to inaugurate the Blood Temple, Graves said, stepping into the room. And our choir is ready. Agatha appeared behind Graves, holding a long leather whip. Such a pity, Adrian. You could have been part of the greatest thing in human history. Great, Lucas roared. You've killed 32 innocent people. 33, Graves said, his smile widening. Evelyn Carter was number 32, and you, Lucas Reed, will be the final stone, Keystone number 33. Who do you think I am? I asked, trying to buy time while Lucas subtly moved towards a side door. Why am I so important? Graves looked at me, astonished. You truly don't remember? You are Stigma, the greatest architect of Freemasonry, the one who designed Blood Temple 333 over a century ago. You possess the ability to transform human bones into living architectural material. You're insane, I said, still gripping my gun. I am Adrian Grey, an investigative journalist. I am not a monster. Adrian Grey is merely a name, a temporary vessel. Graves moved closer. After you completed the Blood Temple in 1901, you were betrayed, killed by your own Masonic brethren, those who feared your power. But before you died, you vowed to return. Your soul would be reborn in a new host after 124 years. And Adrian, at exactly 39 years old, born in 1985, precisely 124 years after Stigma's death in 1901. Agatha continued, It's no coincidence. I shook my head, refusing to believe their words, but the mark on my shoulder suddenly flared hot, as if reacting to their statements. Enough, Lucas suddenly yelled, raising his gun towards the bells on the ceiling. One more step and I'll shoot. Graves smirked. What will you do? Shoot at the dead? No, Lucas replied, pointing at the ceiling. I'll shoot at that. I looked up and realized what Lucas saw. The bells were not only connected to the victim's organs, but also attached to a complex system of conduits. Conduits filled with a dark red liquid blood. Blood conduits, I whispered. They're holding the victim's blood. If those conduits break, everything in here will be submerged, Lucas warned, including your blood temple. Graves' expression changed from confident to worried. Don't be foolish, Reed. You don't know what you're dealing with. I know exactly what I'm dealing with, Lucas retorted. A bunch of maniacs who believe they can resurrect a 19th century serial killer. Suddenly, Agatha swung her leather whip, striking one of the cables connected to a victim's organs. A high-pitched chime rang from the ceiling, making everyone cover their ears. The black-robed cultists began swinging their whips, striking other cables, and then, like an orchestra from hell, the sounds of bells and human organs vibrating blended together, creating a grotesque melody. "The hymn of the Blood Temple," Graves yelled amidst the noise. "Listen, Stigma, listen to the call of destiny." The eerie music wormed its way into my mind, and once again, images from the distant past resurfaced. I, with longer, more slender fingers, was conducting a similar orchestra. Before me was a vast blueprint, the design of a towering building with 33 pillars made from human spines. In the design, the building was not just a structure. It was alive, breathing, bleeding. "Adrian," Lucas's voice pulled me back to reality. "Don't listen." I shook my head, trying to dispel the images. "We have to get out of here." Lucas looked at me, then up at the ceiling again. "I'll create a diversion. When I shoot, you run towards that door." He pointed to a small door on the other side of the room. "And you." Lucas smiled sadly. "I'll follow." I instantly knew it was a lie. He was planning to sacrifice himself. "No," I grabbed his arm. "We go together." "Adrian," Lucas looked me straight in the eyes. "They can't get both of us. One of us has to survive to tell this story." Before I could protest, Lucas raised his gun and fired 3 shots into the blood conduits on the ceiling. Dark red liquid sprayed out, raining down into the room. Panic screams erupted from the cultists. "Run," Lucas shouted, pushing me towards the door. I lunged forward, slipping on the blood-soaked floor. Behind me, gunshots rang out, followed by Lucas's scream. "Damn it," I heard Graves roar. "Get Stigma, don't let him escape." I turned to look and saw Lucas being subdued by 3 cultists, while Graves approached, holding the massive silver compass. "Run, Adrian," Lucas yelled one last time before Graves plunged the compass into his chest. Lucas's agonized scream followed me as I scrambled through the door and into another dark corridor, where the eerie music and smell of blood still pursued. I raced through the dark corridors, my heart pounding in my chest. Lucas's scream echoed in my mind, but I dared not stop. Reason told me he was dead, another victim, number 33, for Graves' insane edifice. The corridor gradually narrowed, and I realized I was running down a slope. The air grew damper, heavy with the smell of mold and metal and blood. After a bend, I stopped short. Ahead was a large octagonal room with a towering ceiling like a Gothic cathedral. Dim torchlight illuminated the white marble floor, where a colossal symbol was deeply carved. A compass and square intersecting with a G in the center. But what horrified me wasn't the symbol, but what flowed in its carved channels fresh blood, moving in an unnatural way. The blood didn't flow by gravity, but at precise angles, as if controlled by an unseen force. Each tiny stream of blood formed perfect 47-degree angles as they met, creating a complex geometric network on the floor. "Hemal architecture," a voice echoed from the shadows. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I startled, spinning around. Agatha emerged from a dark corner, still holding her leather whip. "How did you get here before me?" I asked, backing away. Agatha smiled. "The old Viceroy's palace does not operate by conventional spatial rules, Adrian, especially when the blood temple begins to form." I looked around, searching for an exit, but found only closed doors and cold stone walls. "Lucas is dead, isn't he?" I asked, knowing the answer. "Not entirely," Agatha said, her voice full of mystery. "Death for a keystone is not like ordinary death. The body ceases to function, but the soul becomes part of the architecture." "You're monsters," I growled. "No, Adrian," Agatha shook her head. "You are the monster. Stigma, the great architect, the one who designed a structure from the bones and blood of 33 victims, the one who invented the technique of bending human spines into pillars without breaking them, the one who discovered how to make blood flow against gravity, creating perfect 47-degree angles." 47 degrees? I asked, my eyes fixed on the blood trails on the floor. "Why 47 degrees? What's special about it?" Agatha smiled, pleased with my question. 47 degrees is the sacred angle. First, it is 33 and 14 combined, 2 sacred numbers in Freemasonry. Second, it is the precise angle at which blood can flow against gravity when activated with the correct bioenergy. Third, it is the angle at which the crystals in red blood cells will align to form a semi-solid structure, not solidifying too quickly, but not too liquid to lose its shape. And fourth, she paused, looking into my eyes, it is the exact angle the compass and square create when correctly placed in the Mason's ritual. Though the explanation seemed insane, it made a strange kind of sense to me, as if a part of me had known this for a long time. "I am not Stigma," I yelled, dropping my arms. "I am Adrian Grey." Agatha stepped closer. "Then explain why you know about the meaning of the 47-degree angle in Hemel architecture." I suddenly realized I had been staring at the blood trails on the floor, and in my mind, I was automatically calculating the precision of the angles. How did I know that 47 degrees was the perfect angle for blood to move without coagulating too quickly? "It's just a coincidence," I stammered. "There are no coincidences," Agatha said, raising her whip. As the whip struck the floor, one of the blood streams shot up, forming a perfect parabola in the air before falling back down in a straight line along the G symbol. "That symbol is not simply G," Agatha explained like a teacher addressing a student. "It stands for geometry, the ultimate science of architecture. But for the blood temple, it has another meaning. It represents Genesis, creation, the ability to create life from death." I noticed the blood streams began to move faster, and the geometric network on the floor was gradually forming another shape, a solitary eye looking directly at me. "The all-seeing eye," I whispered, again wondering how I knew that. "Indeed," Agatha nodded, pleased. "The eye that comprehends all secrets of the universe, seeing through the thin veil between life and death. And you, Adrian, are the only one who can open it." "What do you want from me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was racing. "I want you to accept your destiny," Agatha said. "Accept that you are Stigma reborn and complete the blood temple. For 124 years, we have awaited this moment." "And if I refuse?" Agatha's smile vanished. "Then all those who have died, including Evelyn and Lucas, will have died in vain, and you will still become Stigma, just in a less pleasant way." She raised her whip again, but this time she didn't strike the floor. Instead, the whip cracked through the air, creating a deafening shriek. Immediately, the blood streams on the floor shot up, forming countless thin blood ropes that flew towards me like arrows. "All right," I yelled, raising my hands in surrender. "I'll do it. I'll do as you say." The blood ropes froze in midair, hovering inches from my face. Agatha smiled in triumph. "A wise choice, Stigma." "I need to see graves," I said, a vague plan beginning to form in my mind. "If I truly am Stigma, I want to fully understand the blood temple before completing it." "Of course," Agatha nodded. "Grandmaster Graves awaits in the silent chamber, where number 33 is being prepared." A door behind Agatha slowly opened, revealing a new corridor illuminated by pale blue torches. "Come with me," she said. "There is one final ritual before you can reclaim Stigma's full memories and power." I stepped towards the door, trying not to look at the blood eye on the floor, which was still staring at me. But as I passed it, I could swear the pupil of the eye moved, tracking my every step. Agatha led me into the corridor, and the door slammed shut behind us. No way back. "One question," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Why was Stigma reborn in me? Why not someone else?" Agatha looked at me, her eyes as if speaking to a child. "Because we created you, Adrian, a new body for an old soul. Stigma's DNA was implanted into a carefully chosen pregnant mother in 1984. I stopped dead. "What are you saying?" "Your mother didn't die in childbirth, Adrian," Agatha said, her voice cold. "She was a volunteer, a loyal devotee of Freemasonry. She willingly became the vessel for Stigma's seed and then became the first keystone of the new blood temple." "No," I shook my head, feeling sick to my stomach. "That's impossible." "Your blood is Stigma's blood," Agatha continued. "Your DNA contains special encryptions that we implanted. That is why the mark appeared on your shoulder. That is why you can understand the 47-degree angle and the symbol of the all-seeing eye." My legs felt like they wanted to give out. My entire life was a lie, an experiment. Who was I really? Be proud, Adrian. Agatha placed a hand on my shoulder. You are our greatest masterpiece, the flesh and blood reincarnation of the greatest architect of all time. I looked down at my hands, the hands I had used to write, to shake hands, to embrace Evelyn, and wondered if they had ever held a silver compass to cut human spines. Was I truly the monster they believed? We're almost there, Agatha said, gesturing forward where the corridor opened into another room. Graves awaits with Keystone number 33. I continued walking, feeling as if I were stepping into a bottomless nightmare. The blood on the walls began to flow in a new direction as we approached the room, still perfect 47-degree angles, but now they formed Latin words, Stigma Dominus Architectus Reversus. Stigma, Lord Architect, has returned. The room ahead was so vast I couldn't see the opposite wall. Ancient stone pillars soared upwards, covered in blood-soaked symbols. In the center of the room was a massive circular basin filled with a dark red liquid, too thick to be ordinary blood. Modern scientific tests would classify it as a special form of plasma, with hemoglobin and protein levels 5 times above normal. And Alexander Graves stood beside the basin, still holding the silver compass, now dripping fresh blood onto the floor. Behind him was a group of black-robed cultists carrying a heavy object covered with a black cloth. Stigma, Graves greeted. Finally accepting your heritage, I see. I want to know more, I said, stepping closer to the blood basin, before I remember everything. Graves nodded, understanding. Of course, a great architect always needs to understand his materials. He motioned to the cultists, and they placed the heavy object on the floor, pulling away the black cloth. I had to struggle not to scream. It was Lucas Reed, or at least what remained of him. His body had been completely flayed. Muscles and tendons were methodically separated, revealing the pale white skeleton beneath. But instead of lying straight, his spine and pelvis had been bent, forming a bizarre shape, like the final piece of a complex 3D puzzle. Keystone number 33, Graves said, his voice full of pride. The final piece. Why Lucas? I asked, trying to suppress the nausea. Why him? Because it was all destiny, Agatha replied. Each keystone is meticulously chosen. Each body has a unique characteristic that makes it an indispensable part of the blood temple. And the number 33, I muttered. 33 degrees in the Masonic ritual. Graves nodded. 33 vertebrae in the human spine, Christ's 33 years of life when crucified, a sacred number. He waved his hand, and a cultist brought an old parchment scroll. Graves unrolled it on a nearby table. The list of 32 keystones, he explained, and the 33rd name. I leaned down to look at the list. On it were 32 names, each written in dark red ink with strange notes beside them, describing their precise position in the edifice. And on the last line, written in fresh ink, 33, Lucas Reed, Keystone. Look, Graves urged, flipping to another page. The position of each person. The second page was an intricate drawing of a magnificent architectural structure, the Blood Temple. It was shaped like a 33-story pyramid. Each floor was constructed from human bones. At the apex of the pyramid was an octagonal keystone, where all the structural forces of the building converged. Beautiful, isn't it? Graves whispered. Your masterpiece. I looked closer at the drawing and realized that each part of the structure was marked with a number corresponding to the list of 33 keystones. Number 1, Eliza Grey, the foundation, my mother. Number 7, Thomas Walker, the North Main pillar, my first mentor at the newsroom. Number 15, Sarah Mitchell, the East Archway, my English teacher in high school. Number 22, David Chen, the West Facade. My college roommate disappeared in his 3rd year. I recoiled in horror as the truth dawned on me. You killed everyone I've ever known. Not everyone, Agatha said. Only the important ones, those who shaped Adrian Grey. Each of them carried a piece of stigma within their DNA, invisible imprints that we implanted from childhood. When they died, those fragments returned to you, completing the resurrection process. And Evelyn? I asked, my voice trembling. Number 32, Graves pointed to the list. The heart of the blood temple, the one Stigma, or Adrian, loved most. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. You are devils. We are architects, Graves said, without remorse. Just like you, Stigma, we build a new world from existing materials. And now, with the final keystone, Agatha pointed to Lucas's body, the blood temple is almost complete. Graves stepped closer, his voice dropping to an excited whisper. When completed, the blood temple will become a gateway between life and death. A living, breathing architectural structure powered by 33 souls, and you, Stigma, will be the Grand Mason, controlling it all. And if I refuse, I asked, even though I knew the answer. Refusal is not possible, Graves smiled. The bone mark is already carved into your shoulder. The process has begun. It can only move forward, not backward. I scanned the room, looking for an escape, but there was only one door, the way we had come in, and it was guarded by 4 black-robed cultists. No windows, only thick stone walls and blood-soaked pillars. What do I need to do? I asked, trying to buy time. Graves' face lit up as if he had been waiting for this question. The final ritual will take place in the silent cutting room, where the keystone will be put into place. But before that, you need to remember. Remember everything. He gestured, and 2 cultists approached, carrying a silver plate on which rested a goblet of dark red liquid. The blood of all Keystones, Agatha explained, preserved through generations. Drink it and you will remember everything. I looked down at the goblet of blood, disgust and despair rising within me. But I had to buy time, had to find a way out of here. Is there anything else I need to know before I remember? I asked. Graves and Agatha exchanged glances. Stigma is not your real name, Graves finally said. It's merely an alias within Freemasonry. Your real name is Edmund Carter, Agatha interrupted. Ancestor of Evelyn Carter, a genius 19th century architect who discovered that human bone structure, if properly modified, could create building material stronger than steel, more flexible than rubber, and alive. Carter, Evelyn's last name, I felt another piece of the puzzle fall into place. Evelyn is my descendant. Graves nodded. And the vessel for the most important part of Stigma's soul, the ability to make blood flow against gravity. I swallowed hard, looking down at the goblet of blood again. If I drank it, would I truly become Stigma? Would Adrian Grey disappear forever? And Lucas, I asked, glancing at his disfigured body, what does he have to do with all of this? Reed was an unforeseen variable, Agatha admitted, looking annoyed. A curious journalist who accidentally stumbled upon our tracks while investigating the disappearances, but destiny brought him to us perfectly. His bone structure has an exceptional pliability, ideal for a keystone. Everything happens for a reason, Graves added. There are no coincidences. All right, I said, reaching for the goblet of blood. I'll do it. A triumphant smile spread across Graves' face. Grandmaster Stigma, welcome back. I raised the goblet to my lips, battling the instinct to throw it away. But before the liquid touched my mouth, a loud explosion echoed from a distance, shaking the entire room. What was that? Graves roared. Lucas's explosives, I realized. He planted explosives at the eastern exit. In the moment of chaos, I splashed the goblet of blood into Graves' face and lunged towards the door. The cultists were too surprised to react in time, and I slipped past them, running into the dark corridor. Get him, Graves roared from behind. Stigma must not escape. I ran through winding corridors, not knowing where I was going, only that I had to escape Graves and his insane cultists. A door appeared ahead, heavy, made of black oak with 33 symbols carved into it. With no other option, I pushed it open and rushed inside. It was the silent cutting room. From the moment I stepped into the silent cutting room, I instantly understood why it had that name. The space was incredibly still, so quiet I could hear the blood flowing in my own veins. It wasn't ordinary quiet, but a kind of tangible silence, as if sound was swallowed by the very air. The room was designed according to inverse acoustic principles. Its surfaces were specially treated to absorb all audible frequencies. Even a clap would be instantly swallowed, creating no echo. This type of room is typically used in modern acoustic laboratories, but this room had been built over a century ago, long before acoustic science was developed. The room was perfectly circular with a soaring ceiling that formed a dome. On the walls were 32 alcoves, each holding a faintly glowing object carved bones, transformed into strange shapes. Each bone had a name carved beneath it, names I had seen on the list graves showed me. In the center of the room was an octagonal stone pedestal, and on it, a complex metal frame shaped like an inverted crucifix. And on that frame was Luca's reed. "Lucas," I whispered, rushing towards him. He was still alive, his eyes wide, glancing at me as I approached, but his body was horribly disfigured. His skin and flesh had been stripped away from the waist down, revealing his pelvis, which had been bent into an intricate shape. This pelvic bone transformation required special technology, not simply bending by force, but a process of molecular restructuring of calcium phosphate in the bone. Normally, this process would kill any victim instantly from pain and shock. So why was Lucas still alive? "Adrian," Lucas whispered, his voice weak. "Run." "I'll help you get out of here," I said, trying to find a way to unfasten the chains holding him to the metal frame. "No way," Lucas panted. "Too late." I looked closer at his body and realized with horror that the transformation was nearly complete. His pelvis had been honed into a perfect octagonal stone, ready to fit into place at the apex of the blood temple. His blood was being channeled through a system of thin tubes, flowing onto the floor at perfect 47-degree angles, forming an intricate network. "How did they find me?" Lucas asked, each word difficult. "I don't know," I replied, still trying to undo the chains. "Graves said you were an unforeseen variable." "No," Lucas tried to say. "I was number 33 from the start." I stopped, looking at him intently. "What do you mean?" Lucas's eyes met mine, full of pain. "They chose me at birth." Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. "They've been watching your whole life, just like they watched me." Lucas nodded weakly. "All my investigations were guided by Agatha." "By Edmund Carter," Lucas whispered, blood oozing from the corner of his mouth. "Stigma." A door opened behind me, and heavy footsteps echoed. I spun around to see Graves enter, followed by Agatha and a group of black-robed cultists. "How touching," Graves said, his face still stained with blood from the goblet I had thrown. "A reunion of the two most important pieces." "You planned all of this, didn't you?" I roared, "from beginning to end." "That is the work of an architect." Graves stepped closer. "To plan, to foresee, and to build. Every brick, every steel beam has its place, just like every keystone." "Why Reed?" I asked. "Why me?" "Because of genetics," Agatha replied, stepping to stand beside Graves. "Lucas Reed's DNA contains the perfect genetic code for a keystone, and you, Adrian, are the vessel for Edmund Carter's soul, Stigma." "That makes no sense," I shook my head. "I'm a journalist, not a psychotic architect from the 19th century." "But you've always been obsessed with architecture, haven't you?" Agatha asked. "The drawings you make in your sleep, the nightmares of buildings made of bone, your unusual interest in Freemasonry." She was right. Ever since I was a child, I had drawn strange designs, buildings that defied normal physics with curves that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space, dreams of spinal structures and ribcage arches. I had always assumed it was just a vivid imagination. But no, I shook my head harder. I am not him, I cannot be him. "Denial is useless," Graves said. "The bone mark on your shoulder proves it all. Only Stigma can bear that mark." "So what happens if I remember?" I asked. "If I become Stigma?" "Then you will complete the blood temple," Agatha replied. "Place the keystone into its position, open the gateway between life and death. You will become the master of 33 souls, and their energy will grant you power beyond human limits." "Become a god?" I asked, unable to hide my skepticism. "Become the grand architect," Graves corrected, "the one who can reshape reality at will." Agatha stepped closer, holding another goblet of blood. "This is your final choice, Adrian. Drink the blood and become Stigma. Or what?" I challenged. "Or become Keystone number 34, Graves finished. "We always have a contingency plan." I looked at Lucas, breathing weakly on the crucifix frame, then at the goblet of blood in Agatha's hand. No easy choice. "If I become Stigma," I said slowly, "can I save Lucas?" Graves and Agatha exchanged glances. "The transformation process is almost complete," Graves said. "But with Stigma's power, perhaps you could free his soul instead of leaving it trapped in the blood temple forever." "Don't trust them," Lucas whispered, too faint for anyone but me to hear. I thought quickly. Even if Graves was lying, drinking the blood might still give me a chance to do something, rather than being chained to the crucifix like Lucas. "I'll do it," I said, reaching for the goblet of blood. A triumphant smile spread across Graves' lips. A wise choice. I raised the goblet to my lips, taking a deep breath. The liquid was thick, strangely warm, as if it had just been drawn from a living body. Before drinking, I glanced at Lucas one last time. His eyes met mine, and for a fleeting moment I saw understanding in them. And a silent message: do what you have to do. I drained the goblet of blood. The effect was immediate and violent, as if hundreds of needles were piercing my brain at once, bringing with them memories and images that were not my own. Edmund Carter, architectural genius ostracized by society for his daring designs. Edmund Carter, discovering the secret of the architectural properties of human bones while dissecting a corpse. Edmund Carter, joining Freemasonry, rising to its highest ranks, and becoming Stigma, leader of a secret branch studying hemal architecture. Edmund Carter, designing Blood Temple 33, a structure that could reshape reality if built correctly. Edmund Carter, betrayed by conservative Masonic brethren, killed by his own silver compass. And then, a final memory, clearer than all others. Edmund Carter, in his last moments, bent the final keystone by 1 degree, destroying the Blood Temple's perfect symmetry, causing it to collapse and remain unfinished. The memories stopped, and I gasped, falling to my knees on the floor. I looked up to see Graves and Agatha watching me with anticipation. "Stigma," Graves whispered hopefully. I slowly stood up, feeling a new power flowing through my veins, not just physical strength, but a profound understanding of space, geometry, and blood. I could feel the blood in the room, not just Lucas's, but all 32 other keystones, flowing through hidden conduits in the walls. I could control it, mold it, make it flow against gravity. "Yes," I replied, my voice deeper now. "I am Stigma." Graves knelt, followed by Agatha and the cultists. "Grandmaster, we welcome your return." "Stand up," I commanded. "There is much to be done. The Blood Temple must be completed before dawn." I walked to Lucas's side. Our eyes met. In his eyes, I saw fear. Not fear of death, but fear that I had truly become Edmund Carter. But behind that fear, I saw a tiny flicker of hope, because we both remembered Stigma's final memory. The keystone bent by 1 degree. "Begin the ritual," I ordered. "I will put the keystone in its place." Graves' face was elated. Finally, after 124 years, the Blood Temple will rise. "Yes," I nodded, my hand resting on Lucas's transformed pelvis. "It will rise, and everything will change forever." Part 3. The ancient Latin chant rose from 33 throats, forming a somber melody never before heard on this earth for over a century. Graves led the procession, holding high Lucas's blood-soaked silver compass. I followed, wearing a black robe embroidered with the red eye symbol, surrounded by the black-robed cultists of the Red Branch. The sounds of the ritual were not ordinary singing. Each cultist chanted at a different frequency, creating an acoustic phenomenon called geometric harmony. As sound waves interfered with each other, they formed fixed geometric patterns in the air. Modern science calls these cymatic patterns, but the Freemasons had known about them since the 18th century. These vibrational patterns, though invisible to the naked eye, could affect the listener's blood pressure and heart rate, inducing an altered state of consciousness without the use of any drugs. We moved through dark corridors leading deep beneath the old Viceroy's palace. The blood on the walls no longer dripped but flowed in streams, forming intricate patterns with perfect 47-degree angles, illuminating our path with an eerie red glow. In my hand was the keystone, Lucas Reed's transformed pelvis, honed into a perfect octagon. His physical body still hung on the crucifix frame in the silent cutting room, but his pelvis, the most crucial part, had been separated, ready for the final ritual. "Grandmaster," Graves turned to me, his face excited. "The Blood Temple awaits, 33 years since we began the plan for your rebirth, and now proceed. I nodded, trying to maintain the deep, calm voice of Stigma that I had learned from the new memories. I desire to see my work once more. Agatha walked beside me, whispering, "When completed, you will be able to control life and death, alter the fabric of reality as an architect alters a blueprint." I didn't reply. In my mind, a battle raged between Adrian Grey and Edmund Carter, between the ethical journalist and the mad architect. Their memories intertwined, forming a third person, a hybrid being that was neither fully one nor the other. The procession stopped before a massive bronze door, intricately carved with 33 Masonic symbols. Graves placed his hand on the door, and blood from his hand Lucas's blood flowed into the carvings, making them glow. The door opened, and a blast of icy air hit us. The smell of blood and flesh was so thick I nearly vomited, but the stigma within me found a strange allure in that scent, the smell of the purest architectural material. Behind the door was a space so vast it was immeasurable, a colossal underground cavern beneath the city. And in that cavern, it was there, the Blood Temple. The structure soared upwards at least 33 stories, made of human bones and tendons. Its foundation was made of pelves, its pillars from femurs and arm bones, its arches from ribs bent with superhuman precision. The entire structure was covered by a thin membrane like human skin, stretched taut and constantly vibrating as if breathing. Blood flowed through complex channels, forming a vast network of veins throughout the building, glowing with an eerie red light. At the apex of the tower was an octagonal void, the position for the keystone. "Do you remember?" Graves whispered. "It is your magnificent creation." I remembered. Edmund Carter remembered. This design had haunted my dreams since childhood, the structure he had spent his life designing but couldn't complete before his betrayal. 33 spines, I muttered, looking at the center of the tower. And indeed, 33 human spines had been connected to form a colossal conduit running along the main axis of the Blood Temple. Each vertebra was carved with intricate symbols, and blood flowed through the gaps between them, creating an eerie sound like wind whistling through a grand organ made of flesh and bone. "The spinal conduit," Agatha explained, following my gaze. "When the keystone is put into place, blood will flow through this conduit with immense pressure, creating a sound that can break the barrier between life and death." I stepped closer, examining the structure. In the dim light, I could see the outlines of human faces carved into the bones of the victims who had been killed to create it. Evelyn's face on the 32nd floor, just below the keystone's position, and around her, other faces I recognized. Thomas Walker, Sarah Mitchell, David Chen, everyone I had ever known. "Are they alive?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Their souls are still alive," Graves replied. "Trapped within the architecture, that is the Blood Temple's power source, 33 souls living in eternal agony." I wanted to scream, to destroy this entire monstrous creation, but the stigma part of me gazed at it with terrible pride, my greatest work. "It is time," Graves announced, turning to the cultists. "Prepare the keystone placement ritual." The cultists dispersed around the Blood Temple, each standing at a marked position on the floor. They removed their robes, revealing naked bodies covered in intricate Masonic tattoos. Agatha led me to a stone pedestal in the center, facing the Blood Temple. "From here, you will complete the edifice," she said. "How?" I asked. "Blood," she replied simply, taking out a silver knife with a human skull hilt. "Your blood, mixed with the blood of the final keystone, will activate the lift mechanism. You will be raised to the top of the tower to place the keystone." Graves approached, holding a silver tray on which lay a strange Tula type of trowel made from a human spine with a sharp blade at the end. "Your trowel," he said, his voice full of reverence. "The final tool of a grand mason." I took it, feeling a strange familiarity. My hand fit the bone hilt perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for me. "Begin," I commanded. The voice that emerged was no longer my own. The chanting grew louder, and the cultists began to cut into their own bodies, letting blood flow down onto the floor along pre-marked lines. The blood flowed into the channels, forming a complex network, all converging towards the stone pedestal where I stood. Agatha handed me the knife. Cut into your right palm and let the blood drip onto the keystone. I looked down at the keystone, Lucas's pelvis, in my left hand. The bone part was completely transformed, pale white and hard as marble, yet still bearing faint traces of blood. I pressed the blade against my palm, and another memory of Edmund Carter flooded in. 1901. I stood in this very spot, preparing to place the final keystone. But in the final moment, I realized the horrible truth about what I was about to do: open a gateway for creatures from the other side into this world. I was deceived. The Freemasons had used me, exploited my architectural talent, and so I destroyed it all. In that moment of lucidity, I understood the truth. Edmund Carter was not the brutal murderer Graves had described. He had been used, just like me, and in his final moment, he betrayed the Freemasons to save the world. And now, history was repeating itself. I made a deep cut across my palm. Blood flowed out, dripping onto the keystone. Upon contact with the bone, my blood suddenly vaporized, creating a thin, reddish mist. "Success," Graves roared. "The reaction has begun." The floor beneath my feet trembled, and the stone pedestal began to rise, lifting me towards the apex of the blood temple. As I ascended, I could see the entire structure, an extraordinary architecture that defied all laws of physics and biology. With each level of the blood temple, I passed other faces on the bones, empty eyes watching me. They were moaning, pained sounds echoing as blood flowed through the channels throughout their bodies. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I will free you all." Reaching the apex of the tower, I looked down at the octagonal void where the keystone would be placed. Around it were 32 other bone fragments, each representing a victim, forming a perfect circle. Below, Graves watched with extreme excitement. Agatha stood beside him, her eyes shining brightly in the darkness. "Place it in," Graves yelled. "Complete the great work." I looked down at the keystone in my hand. My blood had dried on its surface, forming a thin, dark red film. I could feel the power vibrating within it. Lucas Reed's soul awaited release or eternal imprisonment, and in that moment, I made my decision. I raised the keystone high for all to see, then slowly began to lower it into its position in the blood temple. "Perfect," Graves roared, "perfect." But before the keystone touched its position, I stopped, and with all the strength of both Adrian Grey and Edmund Carter, I rotated the keystone 1 degree, just as Edmund Carter had done a century ago. Graves' shriek echoed throughout the cavern as he realized what I had just done. "No, it can't be," he screamed, his face distorted with horror. "He's repeating history." But it was too late. As the keystone touched its position, off by a deadly degree, the entire blood temple began to shake. Cracking sounds resonated throughout the structure, and the blood in the conduits began to boil furiously. The 1-degree angle, seemingly insignificant, in architecture, especially living architecture, represented the difference between balance and chaos. Just as a plane can crash if its wing angle is off by a few degrees, or a building can collapse if its pillar is misaligned from the vertical axis. In the blood temple, this angle was far more critical. It was the key to determining whether energy would circulate or dissipate. "Everyone run," Agatha yelled at the cultists. "The blood temple will collapse." In the moment of chaos, the stone pedestal supporting me began to crumble. I jumped, clinging to a part of the structure, a human ribcage arch that had been bent and was suspended at dizzying height. Below, the cultists ran in disarray, but many were pierced by blood spraying from the conduits like liquid spears. In desperate circumstances, I tried to climb down, but an iron hand gripped my ankle. "No," Graves roared, clinging to my leg with superhuman strength. His face was now blood-soaked and distorted with rage. "You've ruined everything a second time." He climbed up, dragging his massive body, still clutching the silver compass. I kicked him in the face, but Graves seemed to feel no pain. 124 years, he howled. 124 years of preparation, and you destroy it again. Graves swung the compass, aiming it straight at my thigh. The sharp, piercing pain almost made me let go, but I held on tightly. "I won't let you escape this time, Stigma," Graves whispered, his eyes bloodshot. "If the blood temple collapses, you will collapse with it." The ribcage arch we were clinging to began to crack. Below, the blood from the conduits had formed a vast lake, swallowing the cultists who couldn't escape in time. "Don't you understand, Graves?" I gasped, blood from the thigh wound flowing down. "The blood temple was never designed to succeed. Edmund Carter knew that. I knew that." "Lies," Graves roared. "You are the grand architect. You designed it to open the gateway between life and death." "No," I shook my head. "I designed it to trap people like you, those who desire power beyond human limits." Graves swung the compass again, this time aiming for my chest. I twisted, and the compass point only tore my shirt. "Agatha," Graves yelled down below, "activate the contingency ritual now." From below, Agatha swung her leather whip 3 times in the air, creating a piercing shriek. Immediately, the blood in the lake below began to swirl, forming a dark red vortex that surged upwards. "The Mobile Keystone ritual," Graves smirked. "If the blood temple cannot be completed, we will transfer it into a living vessel." "You're insane," I exclaimed. "No, I am the only one brave enough to do what is necessary," Graves roared, and with a powerful swing, he plunged the compass into my shoulder, precisely into the position of the bone mark. The excruciating pain made me let go, and both of us fell. But instead of falling into the blood lake below, we were held suspended in midair by an unseen force. "Now," Agatha yelled from below, her voice distorted by magic. 8 surviving cultists stood in a circle around the blood lake, holding up small bone fragments, pieces from previous keystones. They began chanting a new song with a twisted, inhuman rhythm. Graves grabbed my collar, pulling me closer. "Don't you see? We don't need the blood temple. We just need a body, the body of Stigma." I struggled, but the invisible force holding us suspended was also tightening around me, paralyzing my limbs. "Prepare," Graves yelled down. "This traitor will become the living blood temple." From behind me, I heard a heavy clattering sound and turned my head in horror. A strange metal structure was forming from the fragments of the collapsed blood temple floating operating table, moving towards us. I was violently pulled from Graves' grasp and thrown onto the stone table. Chains made of human tendons automatically wrapped around my wrists and ankles, binding me tightly to the table. "Begin," Agatha yelled. Graves landed on the operating table, standing beside me with the silver compass still embedded in my shoulder. He ripped it out, making me bite my lip to keep from screaming. "You had your chance to complete the blood temple, Stigma," Graves said, his voice strangely calm amidst the surrounding chaos. "Now we will try another way." From his robe pocket, he pulled out a strange object-a trowel made from a piece of human skull with a sharp blade at its tip. "Do you know this tool?" Graves whispered. "The trowel of the Grand Mason, to lay mortar and blood between the living bricks of the blood temple." I struggled in vain. Blood from my shoulder wound flowed onto the operating table, forming strange, self-moving patterns. "We don't need a tower," Graves continued, his voice like he was lecturing. "All we need are 33 keystones and a living vessel, and you, Stigma, are the most perfect vessel." He placed the trowel blade on my chest at the location of my heartbeat. I could feel the coldness of the metal penetrating my shirt. "From the sternum," Graves said, "down to the navel. A perfect incision to implant the keystone into your heart." The trowel blade pressed down, cutting through my shirt, then into my flesh. The searing pain spread, and I couldn't suppress a scream. "Slowly," Graves whispered. "We need you to survive this process." As the blade continued to cut downwards, I felt a shift in the air. The blood temple, now completely collapsed, was releasing the energy of 32 trapped souls. In my agony, I could see them faint figures of Evelyn, of Thomas, of Sarah, of all those who had been killed to create this monstrous structure. And among them, I saw Lucas Reed, his face still bearing traces of pain, but his eyes filled with determination. "Adrian," Lucas's voice whispered in my ear, though his lips didn't move. "Remember the keystone." In my agony, I could barely think, but a memory from Edmund Carter from a century ago resurfaced clearly. The keystone was not just a locking stone for architecture, it was a key to release or to imprison, and it always lay in the heart. Agatha appeared beside Graves, holding a small box. When she opened it, I saw a small bone fragment glowing with a faint red light. "A piece of Lucas's keystone," she said. "Prepared. the miniature keystone, ready to be implanted into his heart. Graves nodded, continuing to cut deeper. My blood flowed down my sides but didn't fall. It moved against gravity, forming a pool of blood suspended in the air directly above my chest. Was that Stigma's original intention? Agatha asked, looking down at my pained face. To create a living blood temple instead of a bone edifice. Who cares? Graves replied. We will succeed where he failed twice. The blade had cut down almost to my navel, and Graves began to widen the incision, revealing my ribcage and sternum. The pain was so intense I could no longer scream, only emit faint groans. Look, Agatha whispered excitedly. His sternum already has the mark. Graves leaned down to look closely, and a gasp of surprise escaped his throat. Impossible! On my sternum, a small symbol was already carved, the compass and square intersecting with a G in the center. He always carried it within him, Graves whispered. Stigma has truly returned. Place the keystone in, Agatha urged, before it's too late. Graves took the glowing bone fragment from Agatha's box, holding it high. With this keystone fragment, I declare the new blood temple will rise within the body of the reborn Stigma. He began to lower the bone fragment, aiming it straight at my faintly beating heart. In that moment of desperation, I suddenly heard Lucas's voice whispering again. Rotate it 1 degree, Adrian, as you did with the blood temple. Rotate the keystone in your heart 1 degree. And I understood. With my last ounce of strength, I focused on my heart on its beat. I was Stigma, master of blood and bone. I could control the keystone even if it was in my heart. As the bone fragment touched my flesh, I rotated it in my mind, just 1 degree, enough to disrupt the perfect balance that Graves needed. No, Agatha yelled, seemingly sensing something had changed. But it was too late. The keystone fragment, off by a deadly degree, plunged into my heart, and everything exploded in a blinding white light. In the moment between life and death, everything became crystal clear. No more pain, no more fear, only pure understanding. I was no longer on the operating table. I was standing, or at least my consciousness was standing, in an endless white void. This was not heaven or hell, not a hallucination caused by clinical death. This was an intermediate space, a state of consciousness that the physicist Erwin Schrödinger once called a condensed quantum realm, where past and present, life and death, simultaneously exist. And facing me was a tall, thin man with cold gray eyes and a neatly trimmed 19th century beard. Edmund Carter, the man smiled. Adrian Grey, he replied, his voice deep and warm with a slight rasp. Am I dead? I asked. Not entirely, Edmund replied. We are in the moment between heartbeats, a moment that stretches into infinity until the keystone decides our fate. You actually exist, I said, still disbelieving. As do you, Edmund nodded. We are not one person, Adrian. That is what Graves never understood. How is it that? I started, but didn't know how to phrase the question. How can your consciousness still exist after more than a century? Reincarnation, not exactly rebirth, Edmund replied, slowly pacing around me, but a form of genetic memory. Memories are not only stored in the brain, Adrian, they are also encoded in DNA, in cell structure. Modern scientists call it epigenetic inheritance, where the experiences of previous generations are passed down to their descendants through changes in gene expression without altering the DNA sequence. But the Red Branch has known about this ability for a long time and has sought to enhance and expand it. But your memories, you killed people to build the blood temple. Edmund shook his head, his face sad. Not me. I was merely an architect, one who sought perfection in geometry and structure. I was deceived just like you. By whom? I asked, though I already knew the answer. By the Red Branch, Edmund said, an ancient cult that infiltrated Freemasonry, those who believe they can open a gateway to another reality by using living architecture. Graves and Agatha, they are merely the latest puppets. Edmund said, stepping closer to me, the Red Branch has existed for centuries, always searching for an architect talented enough to execute their work, and they found you. Me? Yes, Edmund nodded. In 1896, they approached me, a young architect with ideas too daring for my time. They offered funding, support, and esoteric knowledge that no university taught. I was seduced by the prospect of creating living architecture buildings that could react to their environment, adapt, even think. You didn't know they would use humans as material. No, not until it was too late, Edmund sighed heavily. They gradually led me down that path, first animals, then unidentified corpses, and finally murder. I finished his sentence as I realized the horrible truth about what they truly wanted: a gateway to unleash what they called the Grand Architect. I tried to destroy the Blood Temple, but they discovered my plan. I was killed by my own compass. So why are you here now? I asked. In me. Edmund smiled sadly. Because before I died, I performed one last ritual. A ritual not of the Red Branch, but of true Freemasonry. I placed a part of my soul into the bloodline, so that one day I could return and stop them if they ever tried to rebuild the Blood Temple. But they used that ritual, I said, beginning to understand. They created me from your blood, but they didn't know you were fighting against them. Precisely, Edmund nodded. They thought they were resurrecting Stigma, who would complete the Blood Temple, but instead they resurrected the one who would destroy it again. A distant sound echoed, like a beating drum. My heart was trying to beat again. Our time is running out, Edmund said urgently. You have a choice, Adrian. You can leave the keystone misaligned by 1 degree, destroying the Blood Temple again and freeing all the souls. Or what? I asked. Or you can align it perfectly and become the architect, not in the way Graves wanted, but in our own way. I don't understand. The power of the Blood Temple is not to open gateways for creatures from the other side, Edmund explained. That is the Red Branch's lie. The true power is to recreate, to rebuild, to repair, and to heal. With 33 souls as its motive force, a true architect can restore what was lost, mend what was broken. Evelyn, I whispered, Lucas, and many others. Edmund nodded. But it is an immense responsibility and a dangerous temptation. No one should possess such power. So what do you want me to do? I cannot decide for you, Adrian, Edmund said, beginning to fade. It is your choice, but remember, whatever you choose, there will be a price to pay. The pounding grew louder, more urgent. The white world around me began to crack. One more thing, Edmund tried to say, now almost transparent. Whatever you do, don't trust Agatha. She is not Pyloros as she claims she is. But before Edmund could finish, the white world shattered and I was dragged back to reality, back to the pain and the screams. I opened my eyes to see myself still on the operating table. Graves was looking down at me, his eyes wide with astonishment. Impossible, he whispered. His heart stopped beating. Stigma, Agatha whispered, stepping closer. But I was no longer Adrian Grey or Edmund Carter. I was both and neither. In the moment between life and death, I had seen the truth. Agatha, I said, my voice no longer like mine or Edmund's. Who is the real Pyloros? A flicker of fear crossed her eyes. Why, I am, Grandmaster. I have always been loyal to you. I looked into her eyes, and suddenly I remembered not from Edmund's memories, nor from Adrian's, but from another source deeper, more ancient. No, I said, feeling power rising within me. You are not Pyloros, you are the architect. Agatha recoiled, her expression transforming from fear to anger, then to a distorted smile. In that moment, I saw her as she truly was, not a human woman pretending, but another entity, wearing human form like a suit. Very clever, Stigma, she said, her voice now deep and resonant. Or perhaps I should call you Edmund, or Adrian, or both. Agatha, Graves looked at her bewildered. What's happening? Silence, puppet, Agatha, or whoever she truly was, snapped. She raised her hand, and Graves instantly froze in place like a statue. 124 years, she said, turning back to me. 124 years I have waited, planned, manipulated. I created you, Adrian Grey, from Edmund Carter's DNA. I placed you in the perfect position to continue his work. And then, at the last moment, you betrayed me again. You killed all those people, I growled. Evelyn, Lucas, all 33 Keystones. To build a better world, she retorted. A world where I could create at will. You are not the architect, I said. You are merely a deceiver, usurping power that doesn't belong to you. Agatha laughed, a dry, inhuman sound. And you, Stigma, who do you think you are? A hero, a savior, or just another puppet in this play? I felt the keystone vibrating, reacting to her presence. It was still 1 degree off, but not enough to completely destroy it. I could still adjust it with my will. I know what you're thinking, Agatha whispered, stepping closer. You're contemplating whether to complete the keystone, to gain the power to save those who are lost. She touched my forehead, and an image of Evelyn appeared in my mind. Evelyn, vibrant and smiling, touching my cheek, love in her eyes. All you have to do, Agatha whispered, is adjust the keystone and everyone will return. That was my choice. Rotate the keystone back into perfect alignment and claim the power to save those I loved. Or keep it 1 degree off and destroy everything, including the last chance to save them. All power has its price, I said, remembering Edmund's warning, and no one should have such power. I focused on the keystone in my heart, and instead of aligning it perfectly, I rotated it 1 more degree. No, Agatha shrieked, seemingly sensing what I was doing. She flung her hand, and an invisible blade slashed across my face, leaving a deep wound from my forehead to my cheek. Align it now, she screamed. No, I said, blood from the wound on my face mixing with the blood from the incision on my chest. I am not your puppet. With a final effort, I completed rotating the keystone 1 more degree, completely destroying the symmetry it needed. Agatha shrieked in rage and despair, but it was too late. The keystone began to vibrate, sending tremors throughout my body. My sternum glowed with a fierce red light, and the blood in my veins began to boil furiously. You have destroyed everything, Agatha howled, her face distorting into something inhuman. I have spent 1,000 years preparing for this moment. Perhaps it's time you found another hobby, I said, and despite the situation, a weak laugh escaped my blood-soaked throat. The keystone in my heart exploded, and everything plunged into a blinding white light. The faint dawn light filtered through the gray clouds, casting its first rays onto my face. I opened my eyes, feeling the gentle breeze and the dampness of dew on my hypersensitive, aching skin hyperesthesia, a common side effect for survivors of extreme physical and psychological trauma. I was lying in an open field where the old viceroy's palace once stood, but now there was nothing but a vast, dry, empty crater. I pushed myself up, groaning from the pain in my chest wound. Looking down, I saw a long scar from my sternum to my navel, strangely closed, as if healed years ago. Yet, just hours earlier, Graves had been cutting into it with his trowel. This rapid healing could only be explained in 2 ways. Either I had been unconscious for much longer than I thought, or the keystone had affected my body in some way, accelerating the self-healing process to an extraordinary degree. What happened? I mumbled, trying to stand. Around me was a desolate wasteland, as if it had just experienced a massive explosion. There was no trace of the blood temple, of Graves, of Agatha, or any of the cultists. Only a large, round crater with dark red earth walls, like dried blood. I limped to the edge of the crater, looking down. Deep below, I could see a complex network of tunnels, like the blood vessels of a giant body. All were empty and dry. The blood temple, I whispered. It collapsed. The collapse process was not random or simple. From a physics perspective, when the keystone rotated 1 degree, it created a destructive resonance effect, similar to how a singing voice can shatter a crystal glass if it matches the resonant frequency. This effect propagated through the entire structure, breaking the biomechanical bonds that had kept the blood temple in existence. As my vision adjusted to the light, I realized I wasn't entirely alone. Scattered around the crater were small objects glinting in the sunlight-honed bone fragments, shards from the keystones. I picked one up, and as I touched it, an image flashed in my mind. Luca's reed, smiling, then dissolving like mist. They're free, I said, a tear rolling down my cheek. All of them. I tried to find Evelyn among the fragments but saw nothing. Perhaps her soul had been completely liberated, no longer bound to any material. As I stood there, trying to comprehend what had happened, I noticed something strange. The mark on my shoulder had vanished. No longer the compass and square symbol, no longer the mysterious G, only normal skin with a faint scar where grave silver compass had plunged in. Stigma is gone, I whispered, but Edmund Carter was still there, in a small corner of my mind. No longer a dominant presence, but merely a memory, an inseparable part of history. I was still Adrian Grey, but changed, carrying the knowledge and experiences of someone who had lived over a century ago. I turned my back on the crater, intending to leave, when a strange sound echoed from a distance. The clear, deep chime of a golden bell, as if from another world. Ding! Just one sound, then silence. The frequency of that sound was not accidental, but precisely at 32 Hz. A frequency many musicologists and physicists call the frequency of the universe, because it corresponds to the Earth's natural vibrations and is believed to create biological harmony for the listener. I stood motionless, listening. After about 10 seconds, the bell rang again. Ding! The second chime was identical to the first. I started counting, and every 10 seconds the bell rang again. Ding, ding, ding. It wasn't a church bell. The sound was too pure, too perfect to come from any human-made instrument. It was as if the air itself was vibrating, as if space itself was resonating. I began to walk in the direction of the sound, passing through the desolate wasteland into the city's deserted streets, still steeped in slumber. The bell led me to a small park where an ancient oak tree stood alone in the grass. And on a low branch of the oak, I saw it a small golden bell, without rope or clapper, ringing by itself with each ding. Ding, the 17th chime. I approached, observing the bell. It was made of pure gold, without any seams or signs of craftsmanship, as if it had been cast from a single block of gold or grown like a fruit from the tree. On the body of the bell was a single symbol, not the compass and square, not the G, but a solitary eye looking straight at me. Ding, the 23rd chime. I reached out to touch the bell, but then stopped. A deep sense of warning told me it would not be wise. This bell did not belong to my world, and touching it could have unforeseen consequences. Ding, the 30th chime. I stepped back, observing the bell from a distance. There was a strange serenity in this moment, as if all the horrors of last night were merely a distant nightmare. Ding, the 31st chime. Adrian Grey, a voice echoed behind me. I spun around to see a tall man in an elegant black suit standing a few steps away. I didn't recognize him, but there was something familiar in his cold gray eyes and slight smile. "Who are you?" I asked, cautious. "An observer," the man replied. "A guardian, if you wish to call it that." Ding, the 32nd chime. "You're not human," I said, a statement, not a question. The man smiled wider. "Not entirely, no, but I am not your enemy either." "You're the architect," I guessed, "the real architect that Agatha tried to impersonate." Ding, the 33rd chime. "I have many names," the man said. "Architect is just one of them, but today I come as one who owes a debt." "A debt?" I asked. "What did I do?" "You stopped the blood temple," the man replied. "Twice. Not everyone can resist such temptation." "Temptation for what?" "To become a god," the man said simply. "To wield power over life and death, to build and destroy at will." Ding, the 34th chime rang out and then silence. No 35th chime. The cycle was complete. "34, I muttered. "Not 33, a new number." The man nodded. "For a new beginning." "Agatha," I began to ask. "Has disappeared," the man interrupted, "along with the red branch, for now at least." "For now, you mean they'll return?" The man shrugged. "Ambition rarely dies completely, and there are ancient things always waiting to be invited back into this world." A chill ran down my spine. "So it will all happen again." "Perhaps," the man conceded, "but not in your lifetime, Adrian Grey. You have played your part." "And the dead?" I asked, thinking of Evelyn, of Lucas, of all the other Keystones. "Where do they go?" "To where we all go, eventually," the man said, "but they have been freed from the blood temple. Their souls are no longer bound to the physical world. They have been saved." "Saved," I said, a glimmer of comfort seeping through the pain. "Thanks to you," the man nodded. I looked back at the golden bell, now silent and motionless. That bell, what is it? A sign, the man replied. A reminder that there are worlds beyond this one and powers beyond human comprehension. And the number 34. The man smiled mysteriously. 33 souls, 33 keystones, and one architect. And with that, the man stepped back into the shadows of the oak tree and vanished as if he had never been there. I stood alone in the park, looking at the silent golden bell. Then, as if understanding its mission was complete, the bell began to melt, pure gold flowing down the tree trunk like metallic tears, seeping into the bark and disappearing. I turned and walked out of the park, back into the normal world, a world unaware of how close it had come to a terrible danger. As I walked through the streets that were beginning to bustle, I looked down at my hand, where the scar from the trowel blade still remained. A part of Edmund Carter still lived within me, but no longer dominant or controlling, merely a memory, a legacy, a part of who I was. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I could continue to live a normal life after all I had experienced. But I knew that I had made the right choice. No one should possess the power of the architect. As I passed a storm drain, I stopped. From below, I could hear a small, steady sound, a dripping, as if water was falling from a leaky pipe. But deep in my heart, I knew it wasn't water. The red branch had disappeared, the blood temple had collapsed. But in the deep caverns beneath the city, in the ancient, forgotten tunnels, traces of it still remained dry blood vessels, waiting to be filled once more. I walked on, trying to quell the fear in my heart. That was a problem for another day, for another generation. But in the quiet night, as the city slept, I still heard it, the unmistakable sound. I still heard the blood dripping beneath the pavement of this very street.